Here we go. So hi everyone, today is January 26th, and this is a Grafana community call after Christmas period. We skipped the last one because everyone was celebrating something somewhere. And today we have just one point. It's a big point, which is Mimir 2.6 release in the agenda. We are building the release candidate now, the first one, and if everything goes well, then we will publish the final version next week, or at the end of the next week. We are testing this right now in production. I think most of the changes coming in this release are changes we announced in the previous call about the store gateway improvements. I'm personally really excited about these changes. Maybe someone who worked on this can speak about them.
I can say a bit about the streaming changes. So we added a new setting, which is too experimental, the streaming series batch size. And when you turn this on, the store gateway should be, or when you set it to something other than 0, the store gateway should be more efficient in handling larger requests. This would help with requests or queries that select tens or hundreds of thousands of series. Previously, those might lead to out-of-memory errors. Now they should be smoothed out. Like the memory peaks should be smoothed out. It's still experimental. We've seen pretty good results internally on reduction of out-of-memory errors. Latency and CPU seem on par with the previous implementation. So do give this a try if you have problems with the store gateways. I'm not sure if we have anyone worked on mmap. Charles, maybe. And the other changes that Nick and Charles did were on removing mmap, the usage of mmap. This would solve some some stalls or hangs in the store gateway due to how mmap is used in Go. Basically, instead of just a small part of the program stopping to read from disk, a lot of Go routines stop. So this looks like the whole store gateway is stalled and not making progress. So health checks fail, request latencies increase. You can, and Nick and Charles worked to replace this with the regular file reads. You can turn these on with this flag, block storage, bucket store, index, header, stream reader enabled. I think we're looking to make both of these improvements the default in the future release. I think that's all I have.
Yeah, great. And we also have a point about moving the Helm documentation to a new place. So,
right. So before this change, basically we could only document new stuff in the Helm chart for Mimir and enterprise metrics as well when we had a Mimir release, because the release process was such that basically we did the Helm chart release together with Mimir, and the documentation had to be in place because it was being copied to the website from a single place. And so the last month or two, we worked on separating the documentation, which includes some rewrites and splitting documents as well, so not just moving files around. But the upshot is that from the next release, we will be able to simply release Mimir and the Helm chart separately. So we can have more frequent, as needed, more frequent releases of the Helm chart with its own documentation. And you will also find the Helm chart documentation. It's in its own place, so it's not going to be mixed in with the Mimir docs. And this idea was picked up by other projects as well. So in fact, we will have a ham charts hub on grafana.com in the documentation, where we plan to add more documentation for various ham charts of different products. At the moment, this is very much work in progress. So there can be some issues or missing links, but at least the Mimir ham chart docs and the link to the Loki ham chart docs is already there. So hopefully we'll improve this. Well, not hopefully, but we'll definitely improve this in the not so distant future.
Great. Do you want to also continue speaking about the native histogram changes you're working on?
Oh yeah. I don't know if you know that in Prometheus, the native histograms support was merged last year, and we are bringing that into Mimir. This work is in progress. We have a development branch where we have some basic functionality going, but we need much more testing and optimizations and fixing some missing features for this to be merged on main. But this is coming along. So for those who don't know about native histograms, if you use histograms in Prometheus, they are stored as a number of separate series, time series. And native histograms is about storing the histogram information buckets in a single series in a new data type. You can find I put a couple of links into presentations about this into the document right now, because it's quite an interesting topic, I think.
Cryo, do you mind sharing an estimation of when the native histogram support could be ready to test? Not production ready, but ready to test for the open source community.
Right. But our kind of planned deadline is March. So we want to finish it basically next month. And we might have something sooner, but I'd rather not commit to anything sooner.
Okay. We don't have much more points, actually, so I've added one about the design I'm working on for the rollout operator we have to automate the downscaling of the ingesters. I would like to make that at least managed automatically by the operator instead of having to call the shutdown endpoint on each of them. That's still in progress, but the first step towards that is that I've released the new version, the 0.3.0, which has a no downscale webhook implementation, which basically allows you to label some stateful sets ingesters in your deployment, and that will prevent them from being downscaled accidentally by someone. And yeah, that's all. I will share the news in the future once I have the design for that and I have implemented the feature. And I think we have no more points for today. So maybe someone has any questions? Don't be shy. There are a lot of new people here today.
Yeah, anyone not working at Grafana Labs who want to present themselves, tell us their story. Are you using Mimir? Are you curious about Mimir? Do you have any question? Can we help you? Theo.
Yeah, I can quickly introduce myself. I'm Theo. I work since 5 years at Giant Swarm. I'm now the product owner of the monitoring team, and we currently thinking about we're interested into Mimir because currently the solution we have for monitoring is not really scalable. So we're trying to evaluate the different solution out there. we've heard about Thanos, we've heard about Mimir, and we're trying to make our mind on what's a good fit for us.
Can you share what are you currently struggling with?
So currently we're struggling with scalability because we have a kind of in-house setup where, so roughly our architecture is that we do have multiple clusters that we monitor, and our Prometheus ingesting all those data are sitting on a single cluster that we call the management cluster. And though we just have one Prometheus per cluster, it's really like not ideal, but that's what we have. So ideally, we want to replace this to have something that scale better, because sometimes the cluster we're monitoring can be quite large, like hundreds of nodes or more. And because there is a single Prometheus in front now, then the memory just explodes. And scalability, then we need to scale the nodes of those clusters. It really doesn't fit. So yeah, that's what we're facing right now.
Yeah, I have one last question. Have you already tried Mimir, or yeah, I know you just read the documentation so far.
Yep, basically reading documentation, but I think Mohammed, which is there and is part of the team, has tried Mimir, some hands-on experience a bit.
Yeah, sure. I'm Mohammed. I work for Giant Swarm. I'm also part of the observability team at Giant Swarm. Yeah, since I had some hands-on on Thanos before, so I just was very interested to explore Mimir in action. And yeah, so I did a couple of documentation reading and so on. And for me, Mimir looks like the same as Thanos, but there is a couple of difference, And yeah, but honestly, I think personally, I think Mimir could help us more in this in our situation. So what I didn't do much, honestly. I just tried Mimir on a kind cluster, and there was a lot of few components I don't understand, like there is caching and so on in the Helm chart mainly. So I need more time to maybe we can get some help from you guys. That would be great.
Are you using our Helm chart?
Yes, the distributed Mimir chart.
Mm-hmm. If you have any question about the Helm chart, there's Cryo.
It's not about the Helm chart actually, but it's the matter of ourselves choosing the best architecture for our monitoring setup. Like Mimir is very flexible. You could choose whatever that suits you, like whether you need to run multiple queries, whether you want ingesters in workload clusters and so on. So it differs, and I think we wanted some expertise in this. Maybe we wanted to get some help to choose the best architecture that we could integrate Mimir in our setup.
So basically, we gave too many options.
Exactly, yes. So the Helm chart is just a matter of configuration. Now we want some drawing, some design document and so on. And then, yeah, maybe doing some real hands-on. And
Yeah, we would be happy to help on the community Slack. And we have, so there are some options that we are thinking about deprecating, something we want to make default in the future, but still haven't made that public. And that's why some options just have two or more options still. So it's always in progress. Like I would personally deploy everything multi-zone nowadays, not single zone. But I'm not sure if we are really moving towards that, or that's still. So things like that you can just ask, and we will point you, or maybe even improve the documentation, because that would help more people.
Yeah, that would be great. Exactly. The thing that I wanted to ask actually is just simple. Like there is a query front end and query component, you know. Like, is it possible to connect multiple queries to each other? I know this is possible in Thanos, and I don't know, is it possible here in Mimir?
What do you mean by connecting multiple queries to each other?
Like,
so
let's say there is a workload cluster that has, you know, a query component, and I thought about having a global query that actually queries from the workload clusters. So the query is actually querying the query on the other cluster.
I think what you mean is what we call cluster federation. I think, to my understanding, I think you're thinking of, too many things. I guess you're thinking about installing something like one Mimir cluster per Kubernetes cluster or per region, and then having a global view over all your Mimir clusters, something like this.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, what we typically, okay, so to do this, you need a feature which we call cluster federation, but it's not available in Mimir open source. It's available in our enterprise software, which is called GEM, Grafana Enterprise Metrics, which is Mimir plus some extra features, including cluster federation. However, what we typically suggest is to just have one single global Mimir cluster. And then you have the agents or Prometheus running in each of your data centers or Kubernetes clusters or region or whatever it is. And they all remote write to a centralized place. So basically you run one Mimir cluster. That's how, just to give you an example, that's how we monitor Grafana Labs infrastructure. We have one big Mimir cluster centralized, and then we have Grafana. We use Grafana agent instead of Prometheus. We have Grafana agent running each Kubernetes clusters, which are across multiple regions, and they all remote write to the centralized Mimir cluster.
Understood. Thanks.
Maybe we can come back later to this. I also would like to let Sean introduce himself.
I'm Sean. I work at Bloomberg on the telemetry infrastructure team, and we're actually evaluating Grafana Mimir as a replacement for our fairly large metric tank install. As you know, that's kind of sort of the way to go. I don't think we really have specific targeted questions here, but we do have a lot of like backstory that I think some people at Grafana know and some don't, with our data size, and it's going to be quite an effort, I think, for us to migrate to Mimir, just because of some of our internal, I would say, like opinions that we've already kind of placed in our data schemes. And just our volume, because we have about 1 billion series and 13, 14 million data points a second right now. So it's it'll be an interesting project.
So for the rest of the audience, Metric Tank is another open source TSDB built by Grafana Labs, and it's specific to graphite. So my question for Sean is, given you are evaluating the option to migrate to Mimir, do you also plan to move your observability stack from Graphite to Prometheus? I mean, from QL and Prometheus agent or Grafana agent, whatever it is?
Yeah, so we don't actually use anything graphite except the query language. Realistically, we don't use like the Carbon protocol or anything like that. It's all, sort of in-house built protocols and things like that, including our own histograms. So we're really looking forward to native histogram support in Mimir, because we would definitely want that. That's been on our to-do list for like 5 years, and we just never got around to it. So that's really exciting. But yeah, we don't really use graphite except for the query language. Unfortunately, we have about 10,000 dashboards in Grafana, all written with graphite. So we probably will need that shim layer that I think Gem provides to make graphite accessible. But we have a lot of teams running Kubernetes or other open source products that are just a sort of plug and play with Prometheus that are, dying to get PromQL access so they can just grab open source dashboards and plop them into Grafana and have it just work without having to like rewrite everything. So ideally we'd support both for at least a reasonable length of time.
Nice. Well, that's pretty exciting. You currently run Metric Tank at a very big scale. Obviously, for us, would be very interesting if you would switch to Mimir. Herb, sorry to call you directly, even if you didn't raise your hand. I know we spoke here previously.
Yes. Well, I'm part of the same team as Theo and Mohamed at Giant Swarm, so working on monitoring, and yeah, I think they already explained what we are looking for at Giant Swarm. So last time, I guess you said just try it. Replace one of your Prometheus with Mimir and see what happens. But we haven't had time to do that yet, so nothing new from me.
Yeah, I think my main feedback is if you hit any issue, and you may, actually it's likely you will hit any issue. Many times the typical problem is doing capacity planning. That's one of the typical problems when you approach Mimir. You don't know how each component should be sized or scaled and so on. My suggestion is to just raise an end, try to reach out to Haz either through Slack or through a GitHub discussion. Nowadays, I mostly monitor GitHub discussions. Other people monitor Slack. We are implicitly this split. But yeah, ask for help, and we will do our best to make you successful in this proof of concept.
I guess today our problem is we don't know yet what problems we will encounter with Mimir. We know what problems we have with Prometheus, like single instance, and what problems we have with our way of sharding it. But yeah, I think we should really have do a big test installation, like with 100 nodes and our usual monitoring, and just set a Mimir instead of our Prometheus and see how it behaves. Like, I know we have some specific use cases that are quite a pain for us. Like, for instance, 100 nodes means 60, 70 gigabytes of RAM for our Prometheus. If we could balance it as our Prometheus run on a management cluster, if we could balance it over the nodes of the management cluster, see it how it actually works, if it really changes if it really can balance the memory and have a global measure what is the global consumption of the memory for our small clusters, for our big clusters, what happens. Like, we've had some strange cases where if Prometheus crashes, when he gets up again, we have some Prometheus agents that just try to catch back on the old data, and Prometheus uses like 3 to 4 times more memory than in normal usage. And how does it work with Mimir? This kind of questions.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's why, since you are already using Mimir, the best way to do it is, again, try to install Mimir and try to configure the remote write from at least few Prometheus to Mimir, and then you can configure more and more remote writes until you eventually remote write all the data from Prometheus or directly from the agent to Mimir, whatever works the best to you. Just to give you a data point, at Grafana Labs, we don't have any pod with a memory limit. Any Mimir pod with a memory limit above, I think, 25 gigabyte, more or less. Then obviously, the number of replicas you run and the memory request and limit really depends on your scale. And we generally measure the scale based on the number of active series you have in your Mimir cluster, which is similar to the sum of the in-memory series across all your Prometheus servers.
But okay, so but I imagine then okay, if I keep my Prometheus and I let it remote write to Mimir, at least this Prometheus will have to, like an agent, it will have to manage its wall, at least its wall time, so at least 2 hours of hot data, and it will have to manage this amount of metrics, this cardinality. So it will still use at least my Prometheus entry point will still use its 70 gigs of RAM if that's what I need today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So my question is, are you already using the Grafana agent today?
Yeah,
no?
yeah.
No, but
yeah.
we're not, right?
We're migrating to it.
To the Prometheus
to
agent.
the Prometheus agent, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, right. Well, the key point is that you still need an application which scrapes the metrics from your monitor target and write this data to Mimir. So this application could be Prometheus itself, Prometheus agent, or the Grafana agent. Grafana agent and Prometheus agent are pretty similar, at least for the basic use case. Then in Grafana agent, we have some extra features. So typically, the resources required by the agent, either Prometheus or Grafana agent, are way less than Prometheus itself. Yes, there will still be a wall. Keep in mind the wall itself doesn't take much memory. It's actually very light in terms of memory. It's there's a lot of disk I/O, but in terms of memory utilization, it's not that much. Typically, the memory utilization in Prometheus is mostly given by keeping all the active time series in memory. Basically, the time series over the last 2 hours, 2 to 3 hours. So the agent can help you to reduce a lot the memory utilization, and obviously you wouldn't have any more all the memory and CPU utilization spikes to all the queries,
but
which is not negligible. Queries, a single query can take 10, 15 gigabyte or even more.
Like the alerting rules and stuff like that could at least would run on Mimir.
Yeah, you would run any query. Okay. The user query, the dashboard query, the alerting rules, the recording rules, they will run all in Mimir instead of Prometheus.
Yeah, but we really have to do some tests, and maybe it opens the possibility to shard Prometheus more strongly. Like like have all the odd nodes agents send data to one Prometheus and even to the other Prometheus, because we don't need to reconcile the data on one Prometheus, I guess.
Yeah, that's what we do as well. We shard the agent. Also, what I recommend in this setup where you have an agent and Mimir is to run the agent in high availability pairs, which means for each agent shard, well, let's keep it simple. Let's say you don't use any sharding. Let's say you just have one agent per Kubernetes cluster, for example. Instead of running just one agent replica, you run two agent replicas, and they both remote write to Mimir. Mimir will deduplicate the ingested data. So if one agent is down, the other one will still remote write to Mimir. This is very useful, for example, during rolling updates. I don't know, you roll out a new version of the agent, but you don't want gaps in your metrics. Or also for high availability, like you configure the agent with node anti-affinity rules to run the two agent pods in two different Kubernetes nodes. So if one node goes down, you still have the other agent as a backup.
Is this deduplication behavior in Mimir specific to the agent, or could this work with any of the solution that send metrics? Like
the last one with any solution, it works with any solution. Like you can set up two Prometheus pairs.
Okay.
It will just more expensive with Prometheus because Prometheus will use more resources. But yeah, you can do it with Prometheus agent, Prometheus itself, Grafana agent.
Okay.
This deduplication is based on a specific label, which is attached to all the series remote written by the sender. So you in the remote write section, external labels. Yeah. Okay. There are two specific labels you have to set. One is called cluster, the other one is called replica. And the idea is that you set the same value for the pair. Like you have two agents in each, we both build an HA pair. You set the same cluster name, I don't know, the name of your Kubernetes cluster, and the different replica value. So that when we receive the request, we know from which replica the request is coming from. And then we elect one of the two senders, one of the two agents as the primary, and we keep ingesting data from the primary until we don't see any more data from the primary, and then we switch. We basically fail over to the secondary.
Okay.
And so on.
Got it.
I will give you a link to the documentation of how this stuff works, so you can read more in details here in the chat.
Yeah, sure. Thanks.
And okay, I have a non-related question. You said we still need a Prometheus. It means Mimir does not do the scraping, just like Thanos. We still need a Prometheus for scraping. Okay, service discovery. Okay. I thought it could be a drop-in replacement for Prometheus, but okay.
No, you still need an application doing the scraping. And the main reason is the typical deployment mode. You have one centralized Mimir, and then you write from remote resources, remote locations, like multiple data centers. And typically there's no direct connectivity from Mimir to the different data centers. The main idea is, I don't know, you set up Mimir behind a public load balancer with the authentication in front of it. So any agent across multiple data centers and region can write to Mimir, but Mimir can't open a TCP connection directly to the agents because they are behind firewalls, private networks with net gateways and stuff like this.
Okay, related to a problem we've had, how does it work regarding the the ingress, I guess you need some tuning for the ingress, because when, for instance, our agents sending to our Prometheus, even if it's one Prometheus per cluster, our NGINX ingress with the default configuration could not manage it. They were just denying the data, too much data for them. So we had to do a bit of tuning. And is it usual?
So we don't run with Nginx at Grafana Labs.
Okay.
Cryo maybe can help with Nginx in the Helm chart.
Yes, we do have Nginx in the Helm chart if you install Mimir as OSS. What was the question? Sorry.
Does the NGINX ingress come with some specific tuning to manage the flow of data? If you have like I've seen a few megabytes per second of data sent through HTTP from the agents to Mimir, the Mimir ingress should manage.
There's no special setting, so it's up to like regular service selection on the Kubernetes side to balance it. There's nothing special there.
Okay.
I would say it scales pretty well. So if it rejects on some limits, because we do have some limits in place, of course. If you see the rejects or if you are being alerted, then just add more replicas, and suddenly everything works.
Yeah,
I was going to say that you should. I mean, maybe this is something obvious, but please install the mixin and the alerts for Mimir, because there is a lot of knowledge from our side there.
Yeah. It was not with Mimir. It was with Prometheus that we had this issue, and we had to do some tuning on our ingress, and so maybe it's different with Mimir if it's provided with some specific settings, or with don't know what can change, but we will see when we try it. Okay.
Okay. Mohammed, you mentioned you have HPA. Do you mean you have HPA on Prometheus? Or on Mimir?
No, we don't have HPA on Prometheus. I guess he's talking about Mimir.
Okay. Yeah, we also have HPA, so we use Keda to configure HPA for the queries right now, and we are doing also query frontends. I think Arvi is working on query frontends and more components being auto-scaled.
Yes.
I guess that will come in the next releases, right?
Yeah, I mean, they should be introduced gradually. I've finished up the work on autoscaling the ruler, the cloud gateway. I mean, the gateway pretty much, and then query frontend is following, and also the compactor is being done. Cryo?
I just wanted to mention that when we talk about features, sometimes there are 2 steps before they make it to the Helm chart, because internally it's a different setup that we have, and I think Arve is working on that. So once we tested them out, then they get into the Helm chart. But in fact, I just checked that the Nginx does have HPA capability in the Helm chart already, so you can configure that as well.
Great. Any other questions? Otherwise, we get 15 minutes back. Well, it was nice to meet you.
Thank you
you
very
so
much.
Nice to meet you.
Thank
Thank
you. See you next time.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.